We're now going to have a look at stock takes using bin tracking. When you're using bin tracking, there are two ways you can do your stock take. One, where you start with the IC generate IC inventory worksheet, or if you only want to count a range of bins, then you can start using the generate BT inventory worksheet. Whether you're going to start your stock take in IC or bin tracking, you should follow the following checklist. For all modules, you should complete and post all your open transactions in IC, OE and PO, any documents that affect stock levels. And you should remove any committed quantities in order entry and service manager if you're using that, and then you should freeze your stock processing. In IC, you should adjust all the IC quantities if any locations have negative quantities, negative costs, costs with no quantities, quantities with no costs, and then run a day end and post all the transactions. And in bin tracking, you should ensure you have no open bin transfer documents, and if you have allowed negative quantities per bin, make sure you have no negative quantities in the bins. All of these complications just make the stock take more complicated than needs be. We're now going to look at the stock take procedures inside Sage 300. Looking at the bin tracking stock take visual process flow, we can see our two different ways of doing our stock take. One, starting off in IC, or two, starting off in bin tracking. So after running your day end, if you want to do the entire location or locations, we would recommend you start in IC. You generate your IC workbook, you enter or import your inventory count by bin, print and post the bin reconciliation, which will create a bin transfer to support the up and down with respect to bins. Then it will also update your IC worksheet with the physical quantities counted. Then you go ahead and print that, check your costs, and post your inventory reconciliation. And then you can run the bin totals versus location totals, and they should be in sync if all the items are counted correctly. Or, after doing your day end, if you want to do a cycle count by bin, you could generate the BT inventory worksheet, starting from the bin tracking inventory worksheet option. Then you'd still come to enter or import your count into the bin tracking inventory count sheet, print the reconciliation and post when you're happy. And in this case, it'll create a bin transfer document to support the up and down with respect to bins, and it will create an IC adjustment with respect to any ups or downs in quantities that need to happen for IC. You would then print that IC adjustment, check your costs, post it, and then print your bin totals versus location totals report. In this instance, we're going to start in IC. So we're going to generate our IC workbook. And we're just going to do one location, select all our items, and whether or not you want to start off with the default quantity on hand or start off zero based, up to you. And when IC has finished creating the IC worksheet, bin tracking creates the corresponding worksheet for bin tracking. And I can open it here. And it will put all the items that were on the IC worksheet into the BT worksheet, and it'll include the item per bin quantities plus any cases where IC is over or under bin tracking. In this case, IC has 144 less of this item than bin tracking has. 75, 127 less. So now you need to come and specify your bins or say where these quantities are before you can complete the bin transfer. If we're happy with our quantities counted for this item in our bins, if we're happy with these two values, then we could zero out the negative quantity counted, and then when bin tracking updates IC, it'll be for the total, and therefore will increase the IC quantities. So we could do that for all our negative quantities on our bin worksheet. And for the positive quantities, this means that IC has more than bin tracking. We would either fill in the bin where we find it, or if we don't find it, zero it out, and that quantity will be written off IC when we update the IC worksheet from this bin count. And then we can adjust the quantities per bin manually, or you can import your stock count using a special program to import your stock count. You connect through to the database, and the stock worksheet needs a special format, and you can consult this knowledge base article to see what the format of your stock count needs to be. The reason why we need a specially formatted import is the standard Sage import cannot update a header detail such as the structures of the bin stock count. The header is the location, the details are the bins, and then you've got a detail of item and possibly another detail for your lots and serial numbers. And the standard file import does not support an update of an existing header detail. Before posting this Stocktake, if you are using lot tracking in your Sage 300 database and you're using Info Explorer, we have a cube in our knowledge base which allows you to validate your workbook before you try and post it. It looks for the typical errors in your workbook that IC will not allow you to post through onto an IC worksheet. This knowledge base article describes the scenarios that it works for, and you can download the cube here. I'm just going to open up that cube now. You would change the properties on the cube to point to your database and then click refresh, and it reads your current inventory worksheet, and it shows you, for example, the scenario where your lot number in the database and the lot number in the workbook have a different case. It also shows you those lots which don't exist yet in IC. So if you're updating an IC worksheet, this update will not be allowed to happen. You need to first create that lot. If you've got any lots with reserved quantities on sales orders, you can pick that up here, as IC does not allow you to write off stock if it's committed or reserved on orders. And we can also pick up if your lot cost or lot quantity is negative, which will give you issues when you're trying to post through to the IC worksheet. So it's worth validating your workbook before you try and post your workbook. Correct the errors, then refresh the cube, and only try and post when all the errors have been rectified. And once you're happy with your stock count, you could post the bin reconciliation, which would create a bin transfer for the movement of stock with respect to bins, and would update the IC physical inventory count with the write-ups and downs with respect to IC. And then in IC, you would print the IC reconciliation report to check your costs, and when you're happy, post the IC workbook and then run the report to compare your bin tracking stock levels against your IC stock levels, which should match. Alternatively, you could create the workbook by running this option, Generate BT Workbook. This allows you to select by location a range of bins if you want to. So if you do want to do a cycle count by bin number, you can, or you could select all the bins in the workbook. And now when it generates the worksheet, bin tracking knows this worksheet does not have an associated IC worksheet. You would still enter your count or import your count, and there are handheld solutions that allow you to scan your count and update the bin inventory count. And after completing your count, this time when you post the bin reconciliation, you are prompted for a reference and an IC adjustment number. And bin tracking will create a bin transfer, BT4, to support the movement of stock with respect to bin tracking, and an IC adjustment to support the movement in reference to IC stock levels. And for more explanation on all the different options with your Stocktake, please go to bin tracking, the training video. It has more details on all the different options for the Stocktake. But now in BT transactions, we have BT4, which has those adjustments that are made. And in IC, we have the IC adjustment. The quantity and cost transaction is created. You need to double check the costs and then post this adjustment when you're happy. We've seen some of the Stocktake procedures when using an IC-based Stocktake or a BT-based Stocktake.